And let's be honest, silence can also be a kind of protest, a test, a way of saying, I'm not reaching out first. I'm not showing my cards. It's ego playing a dangerous game with emotion. It's pride standing in the way of truth. But deep down, behind that silence, there's often a longing that hasn't found the courage to speak. So don't let that silence fool you. Don't let it convince you that your connection didn't matter, or that your absence has no impact. How? Because people who are truly indifferent don't need silence. They just move on. They're loud in their disinterest. They're present in their new lives. They don't need to disappear because they're not afraid of what staying might stir up. But when someone ghosts, when they vanish into that quiet void, it's often because being around you would force them to feel too much. Your presence would break the illusion that they've managed to forget. And that's what silence is sometimes really about, self-protection. An attempt to avoid the discomfort of still caring when they wish they didn't. Now, does that mean you should go chasing after him, trying to interpret every silence as some hidden message of hope? No, because your peace matters more than decoding someone else's emotional immaturity. But understanding this can give you clarity. It can remind you not to take his silence as proof that you are forgettable. It can help you stop punishing yourself for someone else's inability to express what they feel. The mistake so many people make is that they fill in the blanks of silence with their deepest fears. They assume the worst. But what if instead you started seeing silence for what it is, not the end of a story, but the evidence that it's not over yet, means not emotionally? You don't have to act on that. You don't have to reopen a door that led to pain. But you do deserve to reframe how you see that silence, not as rejection, but as unspoken struggle. There's so much more behind the quiet than you know. And once you stop trying to read it as abandonment, you can start seeing it for what it truly is. Unresolved emotion trying hard not to speak. Just because he's silent doesn't mean he's not paying attention. In fact, some of the quietest people are the ones watching the most. And I know that might sound strange, especially when you're looking at your phone, wondering why he hasn't texted, why he hasn't liked your post, why he's completely vanished from your feed. It feels like he's just wiped his hands clean of you, like he closed the book and shelved it without a second thought. But here's what's really happening more often than people admit. He's still looking, just not where you can see him. What you have to understand is that men, especially when they still care, have a way of observing from a distance. They may not engage directly, but that doesn't mean they're disconnected. Sometimes they watch your story and immediately swipe away before you notice. Sometimes they visit your profile without interacting at all. They'll ask mutual friends how you're doing in casual, offhand ways that don't raise suspicion. And when they do this, they tell themselves they're just curious. But curiosity is rarely neutral. It's emotional. It's rooted in missing something they don't want to admit they miss. There's something incredibly vulnerable about showing interest after silence. Once someone pulls away, they convince themselves that reaching back out gives you power, that it shows weakness, that it admits they were wrong to leave, or worse, that they still care when they don't know if you do. So instead, they hide behind a screen. They keep tabs in secret. They try to stay informed without being involved. And it creates this illusion that they're out of your life, when really they're still circling quietly in the background. You might think if he cared, he'd reach out, he'd say something. And yes, ideally, he would. I know. But caring and communicating are not the same thing, especially for someone who doesn't know how to navigate their own emotional terrain. Silence, as we've talked about, can be a form of emotional paralysis. And in that state, watching from a distance feels safer than showing up. So instead of talking to you, he monitors you. He scrolls through your photos and zooms in. He reads your captions like they're coded messages. He sees you smiling in that new post. And for a second, he wonders if you're really as okay as you look. You look. He questions if someone else is making you laugh now, if you finally let go of what the two of you had. And that thought doesn't sit easily with him. But he doesn't message you. He doesn't say anything. Because silence for him is a shield. As long as he stays behind it, he doesn't have to face the possibility of rejection. He doesn't have to feel the discomfort of you being further ahead emotionally than he is. So he lingers in that digital shadow, not because he doesn't care, but because he doesn't know how to re-enter the space he left without exposing how much he still feels. Now, here's where you have to be careful. Knowing that he's watching doesn't mean you should start posting with the intention of getting a reaction. It's tempting, I know, to put out something just vague enough to draw him in, to hope he breaks his silence because of what he sees. But you're not here to perform your healing or your growth for an audience. You're not trying to trigger a reaction. You're trying to move forward with truth and integrity. And if someone's watching you in silence but doesn't have the courage to step forward, that's not your cue to pull them out of hiding. That's their journey to face. It's not your job to prove your worth to someone who already knows it but is too scared to admit it. The fact that he's still watching says everything you need to know. It tells you that you mattered, that what you had left a mark, that even now, after the silence, after the distance, he still hasn't fully let go. And while that might be validating in some ways, it shouldn't be the reason you pause your own growth. Because someone silently watching your life from the sidelines isn't the same as someone showing up for it. And the moment you realize that is the moment you stop looking over your shoulder and start focusing on the path ahead. There's this illusion that when someone pulls away, it's a sign they've made up their mind, that they finally decided you're not the one, and now they're done. But so often silence isn't certainty, it's hesitation. It's someone standing at an emotional crossroads, waiting for something, even if they don't quite know what that something is. And here's the part most people miss. When a man goes silent after things have ended, there's often a part of him that's waiting for a sign, a reason to come back, a clue that it's safe to feel what he's still feeling. He might not admit it. He might even try to convince himself that he's made the right choice. But deep down, beneath all the logic and pride and fear, there's still a flicker of hope. Hope that maybe you'll reach out, that maybe you'll leave a door open. That maybe you'll say something that takes the pressure off him having to say it first. Because reaching out, especially after being the one who went quiet, feels like swallowing every ounce of ego he has left. And so he waits. He sits in that silence, hoping to feel your presence in some subtle way. Maybe he posts something that sounds vague but personal, waiting to see if you'll notice. Maybe he goes quiet on purpose, just to see if that will make you miss him enough to say something. Maybe he doesn't block you because somewhere in the back of his mind, he's hoping you'll still see him. Still care, still find your way back, even when he won't admit he wants that. There's a fear beneath all of this, a fear that he still cares more than you do, that you've moved on. That you're stronger without him. That if he came back now, it would be too late. And that fear paralyzes him, because as much as he wants you to reach out, to give him some kind of green light, he also doesn't want to risk being met with indifference. It's easier to say nothing than to say something and be ignored. Easier to act cold than to be vulnerable and not be met halfway. So he convinces himself it's better to wait, better test your feelings than to expose his own. He turns the silence into a kind of game of emotional chicken, who will flinch first, who will speak first, who will care out loud. And in that space, he starts to think things like, if she really loved me, she'd reach out, or if I meant anything, she wouldn't let me go this easily. But what he doesn't realize is that your silence might not be indifference either. It might be you choosing self-respect, you protecting your peace, you deciding that if someone walked away from you, it's not your job to drag them back. That's the irony. Two people can be sitting in silence, both waiting for the other to move, both still hurting, both still wondering what could have been, but neither willing to speak first. And this is where the dynamic breaks. Because if he's waiting for you, and you're waiting for him, you end up in this emotional limbo where nothing moves, but everything hurts. The reality is, if he truly wants you back, he has to be brave enough to say it. If he's still holding on, it has to be him who reaches out. Not because you're playing games, but because you know your worth. You know that love without accountability is just longing. And longing alone isn't enough to build anything real. A man can sit there and wait for a sign all day, but if he's not willing to act on it, it means nothing. You don't need someone who hopes you'll make the first move. You need someone who knows what he wants and isn't afraid to risk pride to fight for it. So if he's silent and waiting for a sign, let your silence be the sign. Let your stillness be the mirror that forces him to confront what he really feels. Because if he still wants you, he'll stop waiting for permission and start showing up. And if he doesn't, then at least you'll know your strength was never in chasing him, but in knowing when not to. There's this moment, right after someone goes silent, where your instincts scream at you to do something. Anything. You feel the void growing and your first thought is, maybe I should reach out. Maybe if you just sent one more message, explained a little more, showed that you still care, it would shift everything. That's the pull we all feel when we're emotionally connected to someone. We want to fix it, to bridge the gap, to make the silence less painful. But here's the truth that most people overlook. When you don't feel that silence, you take your power back. Because silence isn't just an absence of words, it's space. And that space has weight. It forces people to sit with what they've done, with what they've lost, and with who you actually were in their life. When you don't rush in to soothe their discomfort, you allow the reality of your absence to sink in. And that absence can be more impactful than any text you could send or any apology you might offer. It creates a vacuum where they can finally feel what it's like to not have you there. Really feel it, without you softening the blow. We think that being silent is passive, but it's actually incredibly active. It's a decision. A powerful one. It says, I'm not going to chase someone who walked away. I'm not going to make it easier for them to leave me and still feel emotionally supported. It's the difference between being someone they can lean on and being someone they have to live without. And that difference is what forces them to reflect, to question, to miss. When you keep showing up even emotionally, it gives them an escape from the discomfort they should be sitting in. They don't have to feel the full weight of losing you because you're still there, still liking their posts, still answering their texts, still sending little breadcrumbs of affection. But the moment you stop, the moment you let the silence speak for itself, everything changes. That's when they start to notice. That's when it clicks. And it's not about being cold. It's not about playing games. It's about knowing that love isn't something you prove by breaking your own boundaries. If they needed space, you gave it. If they walked away, you respected it. And now, in the quiet that follows, they either realize what they had or they don't. But either way, you're not going to shrink yourself to fill the silence they created. The hardest part is resisting the urge to fix it, especially when you still care. Especially when you're unsure about where you stand. But every time you resist that urge, you reinforce your self-respect. You teach yourself that you don't need to beg to be chosen. That if someone misses you, they'll make it known. That you don't need to chase closure. Sometimes silence is the closure. Not because it gives you answers, but because it reminds you that you don't have to keep asking. And here's what often happens when you hold that space. If he's not over you, the silence gets heavy for him. It starts to echo for him. At first, he may feel fine, detached, in control. But after a while, when there's no more attention, no more updates, no more presence from you, he starts to feel the shift. He starts to notice your absence in the places he took for granted. The routine moments, the daily little things. The comfort of knowing you are always one text away. That's when the silence turns from a wall into a mirror, and it shows him something he didn't want to see. Your silence has power because it creates contrast. It makes your presence matter more. It forces clarity. And if someone is still emotionally invested, that clarity is unavoidable. The silence becomes a question he can't ignore. Did I just lose something I wasn't ready to let go of? You don't need to say a word to create impact. Sometimes the strongest message you can send is no message at all. HUSSEY.